What is form criticism and why do I think it needs to die? Well, form criticism is really biblical studies' own homebrew version of genre theory. It was made up by a guy called Hermann Gunkel, who had worked particularly on the Psalms and a little bit on Genesis, and he came up with some pretty good insights for his day into the way that a genre brings together features of the text with the life situation or the situation in which the original genre would have been used. So the key thing to understand about form criticism is it likes its P's. It's going for genres which are pithy, pure, and pre-textual. So pithy because he was really interested in those short oral kind of genres. He wasn't really interested in the big long literary works we have in the Bible. Pure because he really thought that over time the genres degrade, and so we want to get back to the original purest form of those genres before they started mixing up their lament with their praise psalms, etc. And the other thing is that they were pre-literary. So again, he's trying to get beyond the text that we have to the pre-literary version of those texts. So not what the writer of the books that we have has recorded for us, but the underlying texts behind that, the genres which would have been orally transmitted and used in particular situations, which then have been kind of laid down in the biblical text for us. Okay, so pithy, pure, and pretextual. And his great insight is that if you look at the kind of the written genres, or kind of look at the features of the genre, and marry them up with the life situation, the Sitzenleben in German, which kind of produce that genre, you get a really good view of the genre. They're kind of like two sides of the same coin. So as an example, if you think about country music, right? One way to understand country music is to look at I guess the features of the songs themselves. You might look at the time signatures or the AB, ABA kind of structure of the songs, or the fact that they like banjos. He would say the treasury of thoughts and moods as well, the kind of common themes like pickup trucks and young love and that kind of thing. But you don't just leave it at that. He also thought you need to look at the other side of the coin, which is the situation that produced that genre. Kind of what is it for? So to understand country music more fully, that flip side of the coin, we might look at particularly American culture in the time that produced the music. And we might look at sort of the southern states of America or Republican politics or something to understand not just how the song is written, not just the kind of consistent instruments and themes in the music, but the social side of it. What produced this music and what is it for? So what's wrong with form criticism? Well, a bunch of things. The first thing is it's way too rigid. His theory, Gunkel's theory of genre, is way too rigid. He treats genres as if they're kind of like the laws of geometry or something, unchanging, whereas we know from modern genre theory that genres are always changing, evolving, and only relatively stable. So it's very rigid. It ignores the fact that texts can often have multiple relationships with genres. They're kind of promiscuous. Texts are promiscuous when it comes to genre. And it really locks us into trying to allocate every text into its right box in an unhelpful way. So it's too rigid. Second problem, the method that Gunkel uses for trying to reconstruct these pure, pre-literary, pithy genres behind the text really has some problems. He's trying to get beyond the written text we have back to this earlier stage for which we don't really have any evidence. And worse, the assumptions that he makes to try to recover, right, those earlier texts, if you like, the time machine that he uses to try to get back behind the written text, have some really problematic assumptions, right? So he has these, you might say, kind of borderline racist assumptions about how civilizations evolve over time, and kind of tries to wind back the clock on that to get behind the text. And a lot of these assumptions we would kind of wince at a bit today, like when he describes how the ancient mind sort of wasn't really at an intellectual stage where it could distinguish between poetry and reality, that sort of thing. So we know human civilizations are not on this one linear trajectory towards becoming Germans, right? There's a lot of different ways that cultures can tell stories. And when we read a biblical text, we want to be good guests in their house, understanding the culture on its own terms, not assuming things about how civilizations should evolve. Anyway, so the method for rediscovering the layers behind the text, we would say are pretty problematic. Problem number 3, the reconstructions of that pure pre-literary stage that form criticism and Gunkel ends up with end up being weirdly specific, probably too specific. So you read a psalm like Psalm 44, and Gunkel will come up with this really elaborate story about when and how and for what purpose that psalm form was originally used. There were trumpets over here, there was a national day of mourning for a failed crop harvest, and here are the bits the priest says. And you read this and you think, Hermann, how do you know any of this? And the answer is, he doesn't. He's making it up. The final problem I have with form criticism is it takes us a long way away from the final form of the text. Remember, Gunkel is interested in the pure, pithy, pre-literary stage of the text. He's not particularly interested in the work of the final editors in bringing these literary texts back together. But as a biblical scholar, I'm really interested in the literary form of the text that we have because it's the only text that we have. And so we want to understand that text on its own terms and understand what the editors and what the compilers are doing when they bring these different texts together. So that's the problem with form criticism. Why does biblical studies keep on using it? It reminds me a little bit of when I was at seminary. It was a dry college, all the single men in one big house, and we weren't allowed alcohol, we weren't allowed to drink. However, there was a loophole. I checked. There was no law against brewing beer in the premises. So we converted one of the upstairs bathtubs into a fermenter and we made this wonderful brew. We loved our brew. We would take it to parties, we would share it with people. We brought it along to a party in which there was a very senior Anglican clergyman. As he took a sip, he paused, he looked at us with his very wise ecclesiastical eyes and said, "Gentlemen, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever tasted." And I think biblical studies has a similar problem with its own homebrew. We love our own homebrew theory. We love our form criticism. But actually, it was probably, as Tremper Longman says, probably out of date even when Gunkel was around. And so we need to be willing to learn from the best in literary and rhetorical and social scientific and linguistic genre theory and bring that to bear on the Bible. Because I truly believe the Bible deserves better.